$10 million. That is what I will father his cryptic will.
Gregory Ashworth said it in a conference room full of lawyers, 12 attorneys, 0
Anyone
answers.
I will pay.
Then a voice came from the doorway.
I can do it.
Every head turned. A black woman in a blue cleaning uniform, cart behind her. Gregory stared.
Your mama probably had to sell herself just to get you through grade school. And you think you can crack this?
I can decode every page, Will.
Gregory slammed the table.
Are you even listening?
Preston Wells cut in.
Are you even listening? Let her try, Greg. I could use a good laugh. Give her 5 minutes.
What she said next would change his life forever. But those words he just said? He'd spend the rest of his life trying to forget them. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand what was on that table. Edmund Ashworth was a billionaire, built his empire from nothing: real estate, finance, media. By the time he died 3 weeks ago, his net worth sat at $2.3 billion. But Edmund wasn't just rich, he was strange. The man spoke 6 languages, collected ancient texts like other people collect watches. He once told a reporter that language is the last honest mirror of a man's soul. Nobody really understood what that meant. They just nodded and moved on. Then he died, and he left behind a will. Not a normal will. 14 pages, handwritten, written in a mix of Latin, Old French Creole, fragments of code, and a cipher that Edmund invented himself. Some sections looked like poetry, others looked like math. A few pages didn't look like any known language at all. No one could read it. Without a decoded will, the $2.3 billion estate was frozen. The courts wouldn't move. The family couldn't touch a cent. That's when Gregory made the public offer. $10 million. To anyone on Earth who could crack it. They brought in the best. Raymond Tate, lead crypto-linguist from an Ivy League university, published author, 14 awards. He showed up with a team of 3 specialists. They set up camp in that conference room like it was a war room. Whiteboards, laptops, stacks of reference books. 11 days they worked. 11 days of the sharpest minds money could buy. They decoded 30%. Enough to know the will contained specific instructions. Not enough to execute a single one. Raymond paced. Preston cursed. Gregory stopped sleeping. And every night around 10 o'clock, after the attorneys went home and the lights dimmed, Darlene Foster rolled her cleaning cart into that room. She emptied the trash. She wiped the table. She vacuumed the carpet. But one night, a photocopied page slipped off the table and landed on the floor. Darlene picked it up. She meant to put it back. Then her eyes caught a line. Her lips moved, slow, silent, like the words already lived inside her. She placed the page back on the stack, lined it up perfectly, and walked out. What did she just read? The next morning, 6:15, basement break room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of bleach and instant coffee, a vending machine humming in the corner. Darlene sat alone at a folding table eating a sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil. The crinkle of that foil was the only sound in the room. On the table, someone had left behind a New York Times crossword puzzle, already filled in. Blue ink, confident handwriting. Probably one of the associates from upstairs killing time between meetings. Darlene glanced at it sideways while she chewed. She didn't pick up a pen. She didn't even turn the paper toward her. But her eyes moved across the grid. Slow, steady. Then she murmured 3 words under her breath. 3 corrections. The answers that were wrong. She flipped the paper over and kept eating. A few minutes later, Tommy, one of the security guards, walked in talking on his phone. His voice was fast, frustrated. He was speaking Haitian Creole to his mother, trying to explain the dosage instructions on a prescription bottle. He couldn't find the right words. He kept stopping, starting over, getting it wrong. He hung up, rubbed his forehead, sighed. Darlene didn't look up from her sandwich. Tell her 2 tablets in the morning, 1 at night. Take it with food, not milk. And she shouldn't mix it with the blood pressure medication until she talks to her doctor. She said it in perfect Haitian Creole. Fluent, natural, like she'd spoken it her whole life. Tommy froze. He stared at her for 5 full seconds. Darlene shrugged. My neighbor, Mrs. Beaumont, spoke nothing else for 30 years. You pick things up.
She finished her sandwich,
Folded the foil into a small square, tossed it in the trash, and went back to work. That afternoon, 62nd floor. Darlene was mopping the hallway outside the conference room. The door was cracked open about 2 inches, just enough to hear the voices inside. Raymond Tate's team was arguing. One of them said the passage was corrupted Latin. Another said, no, it's a substitution cipher. The third said they should start over from scratch. Darlene's mop slowed down.
She wasn't eavesdropping. It was more like the way a musician hears a wrong note in the middle of an orchestra.
You don't go looking for it. It just hits your ear and you can't ignore it. Her brow pulled tight. She mouthed something, then shook her head. Slightly, like a teacher watching a student get the answer wrong on the board. She kept mopping. She moved on. But that night she came back. 9:45. The conference room was empty, lights still on, coffee cups left behind, papers scattered across the table. On the whiteboard, Raymond's team had written out a passage from the will, big black letters. Underneath it, a giant red question mark. Darlene stood in front of that whiteboard for a long time. Her cart was behind her. Her mop leaned against the wall. She didn't touch anything. She just read. Then she reached into the supply caddy on her cart, pulled out a yellow sticky note, found a pen, and wrote 5 words in neat handwriting. She pressed the sticky note to the bottom corner of the whiteboard, half hidden behind the marker tray. You'd miss it if you weren't looking. She turned off the lights, pushed her cart into the hallway, and left. Nobody saw her do it. Nobody knew. But those 5 words on that little yellow square were about to blow the doors off everything. That sticky note was still sitting there the next morning, waiting, like a tiny little grenade nobody had pulled the pin on yet. The question is, who finds it first, and what happens when they do? To understand what Darlene Foster could do, you have to understand where she came from. She grew up in the Gullah Geechee corridor, low country South Carolina. Dirt roads, marsh air, Spanish moss hanging off every tree like the land itself was tired. Her grandmother, Opal, raised her. Opal cleaned houses for wealthy families on Hilton Head Island. Big houses, white families, the kind with libraries they never used. But Opal used them. Every night she'd bring home a book she borrowed off a shelf while no one was looking. French novels, Latin grammars, old theology texts with cracked spines. She'd set them on the kitchen table and say, read, baby, read everything. Words are the only thing they can't take from you. So Darlene read. She read while Opal scrubbed floors. She read while the radio played French news from a station out of New Orleans. She read language tapes from the public library until the librarians knew her by first name. She never went to college, couldn't afford it. But by the time she was 20, she could think in 4 languages and dream in 2 more. Nobody knew. Nobody asked. Now she was 52, living in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx with her daughter, Nora, 19 years old, community college, studying to be a paralegal. Darlene worked double shifts to pay for Nora's textbooks, the law firm at night, a church daycare during the day, 6 hours of sleep if she was lucky. She once told a coworker, "My girl is going to walk through the front door of a place like this someday, not through the service entrance, the front door." That was her reason for everything. But Darlene had a rule. She never told anyone what she knew, not the full picture. Not after what happened at Nora's school years ago. A parent-teacher conference. The teacher mispronounced a French word. Darlene corrected her, politely, perfectly. The teacher laughed. "That's cute." 2 words. That's all it took. Darlene never corrected anyone again. The world doesn't want brilliance from a woman in a cleaning uniform. She learned that a long time ago. But the thing about the truth is, it doesn't care who's allowed to say it. It comes out anyway. 7:32 the next morning, Raymond Tate walked into the conference room carrying 2 coffees and 0 patients. His team filed in behind him, laptops open, eyes tired. 11 days of almost nothing will do that to a person. Then one of them stopped. "What's that?" A yellow sticky note. Bottom corner of the whiteboard, half hidden behind the marker tray. 5 words written in neat handwriting. Raymond pulled it off the board, read it out loud. The room went dead quiet. Those 5 words identified the exact dialect pattern Edmund Ashworth had used to encode an entire section of the will. It was Gullah Geechee, a Creole language from the South Carolina Lowcountry, layered underneath the Latin, hidden in plain sight. With that one key, Raymond's team decoded 4 more pages in 2 hours. More progress than 11 days of work combined. Raymond sat back in his chair. He looked at the sticky note like it had fallen out of the sky. Preston was less impressed. Who wrote this? Nobody knew. Check the security footage. They did. The footage showed a cleaning woman entering the room at 9:45 the night before. Blue uniform. Cart. She stood in front of the whiteboard for about 90 seconds, placed something on the board. Left. Preston almost laughed. She probably scribbled something random. Lucky guess, coincidence. Raymond didn't say anything. He was still staring at those 5 words, because he knew something Preston didn't. That wasn't a guess. That was precision. Whoever wrote it understood the structure of the cipher better than his entire team. But nobody followed up. Nobody asked her name. The footage was filed. The sticky note was tossed in the trash. End of story. Right? Wrong. Because one person in that building was paying attention. Catherine Holloway, managing partner of Holloway and Strand. 64 years old, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. The kind of woman who never raised her voice because she never had to. She'd been watching the decoding effort from a distance, not interfering, just observing. When she heard about the sticky note, she didn't laugh. She didn't dismiss it. She pulled the personnel file for the night cleaning staff. She found one name, Darlene Foster. She said nothing to anyone. She just stayed late that night. 10:45, the hallway was empty. Darlene was mopping near the elevators. The only sound was the wet squeak of the mop on marble and the distant hum of the building settling into the night. Then a door opened. Catherine stepped out of her office holding 2 cups of tea. She walked straight to Darlene and held one out. Darlene looked at the cup, then at Catherine. No partner in that firm had ever spoken to her beyond, "The bathroom needs more towels." Catherine reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out a photocopy of the sticky note, held it up. "This was you." It wasn't a question. Darlene's hand tightened on the mop handle. A long silence, the kind that fills a hallway like water. Then quietly, "The pattern isn't Latin. It's Gullah run through a billionaire cipher. Mr. Ashworth, the father, he would have known that. He spent time in the Low Country." Catherine didn't blink. "How much of the rest can you read?" Darlene looked at the floor, then back at Catherine. "Most of it, ma'am." Catherine set down her tea, stared at Darlene for a long time. The hallway was so quiet you could hear the elevator cables humming behind the walls. Then she said 2 words. "Come with me." And everything changed. The next morning, 9 o'clock sharp, Catherine walked into the conference room with Darlene right behind her. Darlene was still in her cleaning uniform. She hadn't been home. She hadn't slept. Her cart was parked in the hallway, visible through the glass door. Every head at the table turned. Catherine didn't hesitate. "This is Darlene Foster. She'll be consulting on the Ashworth will going forward." Silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums. Then Preston Wells stood up. "You're joking." Catherine looked at him. "Do I look like I'm joking, Preston?" Preston pointed at Darlene. "You want to hand a $2.3 billion estate to the opinion of a janitor? A woman who empties our trash cans? Have you lost your mind, Catherine?" He said it right in front of Darlene. Didn't lower his voice. Didn't flinch. Raymond Tate shifted in his chair. He looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say a word. Gregory Ashworth sat at the head of the table, exhausted, tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. He looked at Darlene with something between doubt and desperation. He didn't defend her, but he didn't send her away either. Not yet. Darlene stood in that doorway and felt every eye in the room land on her like a weight. She knew what they saw. Blue uniform, name tag, cleaning cart in the hallway. She almost walked out. Right there, right then. She almost turned around and left and never came back, because this wasn't new, this feeling. She knew it the way you know an old scar. Every time she'd ever dared to show what she knew, the world had pushed her back into her place. The teacher who laughed, the supervisor who told her to stay in her lane. 30 years of being corrected for being correct. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking at her sides where nobody could see. Then she thought about Nora, about the tuition bill sitting on the kitchen counter, about her grandmother's voice in that old kitchen, radio crackling with French news. The words don't care who speaks them, baby. They're true either way. Darlene walked in. She sat down at the table, pulled out a chair like she'd been sitting there her whole life. "I'd like a copy of the full will, please." Preston slid it across the table without looking at her. The room waited. Raymond Tate uncrossed his arms. He read a passage out loud, one his team had flagged as completely indecipherable. Then he looked at Darlene with barely hidden condescension. "Go ahead, explain it." 8 seconds of silence, the longest 8 seconds in that room's history. Then Darlene began. She identified the passage as a blend of Gullah Geechee proverb structure wrapped inside French Creole syntax. Every third word was shifted by a cipher keyed to Edmund Ashworth's birth year. She didn't just translate it, she explained why Edmund wrote it that way. He's testing whoever reads this. He wants to know if they listen, or if they just look. She said it calm, steady, like she was explaining the weather. The room didn't move. Raymond uncrossed his arms. He picked up his pen, and for the first time in 11 days, he started taking notes from someone else. Preston leaned against the wall. His jaw was tight. His arms were folded. But he didn't say a word, because there was nothing left to say. The woman with the cleaning cart had just done in 8 seconds what his Ivy League team couldn't do in 11 days. And she wasn't done yet. Over the next 6 hours, Darlene didn't leave that table. Her cleaning cart was still parked in the hallway. You could see it through the glass door. Blue uniform. Name tag still clipped to her chest. The only person in the room without a law degree, a laptop, or a suit. She asked for one thing. A pencil. Not a laptop. Not a tablet. A pencil. Someone handed her one from the supply closet. She held it the way a surgeon holds a scalpel. Light. Precise. Like it was part of her hand. Then she went to work. Page by page. Line by line. She wrote in the margins. Small, careful notes. She read passages out loud in 3 different languages, switching between them so smoothly it sounded like one long sentence that just happened to change shape. Raymond's team watched. At first, they watched like scientists observing an experiment. Then they watched like students in a lecture hall. Raymond started writing down everything she said. He stopped correcting her after the first hour. By the 3rd hour, he was asking her questions. Preston stood in the corner, arms crossed, silent, jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscle move under his skin. The wall clock ticked. Coffee cups piled up on the table. The Manhattan skyline shifted from morning white to afternoon gold through those tall windows. Then, on page 9, Darlene stopped. Her voice dropped. Her pencil hovered above the paper but didn't touch it. The room noticed. "What is it?" Gregory asked. First time he'd spoken directly to her in hours. Darlene stared at the page. She swallowed once. Then she began to read. The passage, once decoded, wasn't about money. It wasn't about the estate. It wasn't about business at all. It was Edmund Ashworth writing to his children. About how he built an empire but missed their first steps. About how he sat in boardrooms while they blew out birthday candles without him. About how he once flew 14 hours to close a deal in London but couldn't drive 20 minutes to his daughter's school play. And the last line of the passage said this: "I built a kingdom for you, but I forgot to live in it with you. That is the only debt I cannot repay." Darlene read it in English. Her voice cracked once, just once, barely enough to notice. She kept going. Gregory Ashworth covered his face with both hands. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the clock. And somewhere, 62 floors below, the faint sound of a city that never stops moving. But in that room, everything stopped. Because the will was never just a legal document. It was a father's last love letter, hidden inside a puzzle, written in languages no one around him spoke. Because Edmund Ashworth couldn't say these things out loud when he was alive, so he buried them in the only place he knew they'd be safe, inside the words. And it took a cleaning lady to find them. By 6 o'clock that evening, Darlene had decoded 89% of the will. The remaining 11% was on the last page. She suspected the key was hidden in a phrase at the bottom, but she needed time to work through it. Gregory walked over to her, stood beside her chair. He looked different now, softer, like something behind his eyes had cracked open. "What do you need?" Darlene looked up. "A quiet room, and maybe another cup of that tea Ms. Holloway makes." First time he'd ever spoken to her like a person, not a problem to solve. But that last page, it held something nobody in that room expected. And it wasn't about money at all. That night, Catherine Holloway did something she'd never done for anyone in 38 years of practicing law. She invited Darlene into her corner office, the one with the view of the Brooklyn Bridge. Soft light from a desk lamp. City lights scattered across the window like someone had thrown a handful of stars against the glass. Darlene had cleaned this office hundreds of times. She knew every inch of it. The scratch on the left side of the desk, the coffee ring on the windowsill that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she scrubbed. The way the chair squeaked when you leaned back too far. But she had never sat in the chair across from the desk. Catherine pointed to it. "Sit." Darlene sat. Catherine took off her glasses, set them on the desk, and looked at Darlene the way no one in that building had ever looked at her. Like she was a person worth listening to. "I've practiced law for 38 years. I've watched partners, associates, and federal judges try to untangle documents half this complex. What you did today in 6 hours would take most of them 6 months." She paused. "And they'd still get it wrong." Darlene didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. She just held her hands together in her lap and tried to keep them still. The next morning, Catherine walked into the conference room carrying a single sheet of paper, a formal engagement letter. It named Darlene Foster as an independent linguistic consultant to the Ashworth estate matter. A real title, a real day rate. Not a favor, not charity, a professional contract. She placed it on the table in front of everyone. Then she turned to Preston, looked him straight in the eye. "Ms. Foster has consultant status on this matter. She will be addressed accordingly." Preston opened his mouth. Catherine's gaze stopped him. Cold, steady, like a door closing. He closed it. That afternoon, the firm's front desk issued Darlene a consultant ID badge. White plastic, blue lanyard. Her name printed in the same font as every attorney in the building. Darlene Foster, independent consultant. Holloway and Strand, LLP. She clipped it to her cleaning uniform. She still hadn't had time to change. She still smelled faintly of bleach and floor wax. She caught her reflection in the elevator mirror on the way down. The blue uniform, the name tag from the cleaning company on one side, the consultant badge on the other. 2 names, 2 titles, same woman. She stared at that reflection for a long time. The elevator doors almost closed on her before she stepped out. Nobody saw that moment, but it mattered. Because for 52 years, the world had told Darlene Foster who she was. And for the first time, a piece of plastic on a blue lanyard told her something different. The woman with the mop now had a seat at the table. But the hardest part wasn't over. 11% of that will was still locked, and the clock was about to start ticking. Midnight. The building was empty. The hallways were dark except for the emergency lights glowing soft green along the baseboards. Darlene stepped into the stairwell. Concrete walls, cold air, the kind of quiet that makes your own breathing sound loud. She pulled out her phone and called Nora. It rang 4 times. Nora picked up, half asleep, voice muffled by a pillow. "Mom? Hey, baby, I'm gonna be late tonight. Something came up at work." "You always say that, Mom. You're always working." A pause. Darlene leaned her head against the concrete wall, closed her eyes. Then Nora said, "I'm proud of you, though, even if I don't know what for." Darlene pressed the phone against her forehead after she hung up. She stood there in that stairwell, alone, breathing, not crying, just holding everything together the way she always did. Quietly, with no one watching. That's the part people don't see. The cost of being extraordinary and invisible at the same time. You carry it alone, always alone. 20 minutes later, Darlene was sitting in the break room, staring at the vending machine. Not hungry, not thirsty, just sitting. The fluorescent light buzzed above her like a mosquito that never lands. She heard footsteps, looked up. Gregory Ashworth stood in the doorway. No jacket, sleeves rolled up. He looked like a man who hadn't been home in 3 days. Because he hadn't. He sat across from her, didn't ask permission, didn't say hello. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Gregory said, "My father used to put little puzzles in my lunchbox when I was a kid. Word games, riddles, little codes made from letters and numbers." He stared at the table. "I never solved a single one. Not one. I used to throw them away before the other kids could see them. I was embarrassed." His voice cracked, just a fraction. "I didn't know they were love letters." Darlene watched him. She didn't interrupt. She didn't comfort him. She just let him sit with it. Then she said something that made Gregory Ashworth go completely still. "Your father didn't hide the will to keep you out. He hid it so the right person would have to come close enough to hear it." Gregory looked at her, and for the first time he didn't see a cleaning woman. He didn't see a uniform. He didn't see someone beneath him. He saw someone who understood his father better than he ever did. They sat there in silence. The vending machine hummed. The fluorescent light buzzed. And somewhere between those two sounds, something shifted. But the question nobody had asked yet was the one that mattered most. What was on that last page? And what would happen to Darlene when the work was done? 6 o'clock the next morning. Darlene was already in the conference room. Alone. The city was still dark outside the windows. Just the first thin line of light creeping over the East River like it wasn't sure it wanted to show up yet. The last page of the will sat in front of her. 1 page. 11%. The final piece. She picked up her pencil. The same one from the supply closet. It was getting short now. She'd been sharpening it with a kitchen knife she kept in her cart. She read the page, then read it again. Then again. Nothing. This passage was different from everything else in the will. It wasn't blended. It wasn't layered. It didn't follow any pattern she'd seen Edmund use before. The structure was unfamiliar. The rhythm was wrong. Like a song she almost recognized but couldn't name. She wrote notes in the margin, crossed them out, wrote more, crossed those out too. By 8 o'clock, she hadn't moved, and she hadn't cracked it. That's when things got worse. Preston Wells had been quiet for 2 days. Too quiet. A man like Preston doesn't go silent because he's accepted defeat. He goes silent because he's planning something. And he had been. That morning, Preston contacted a rival law firm. They represented a distant Ashworth cousin who stood to inherit a larger share if the will went to standard probate. If the will couldn't be fully decoded by the court deadline, Edmund's specific wishes would be thrown out. The money would be split by formula. The cousin wins. The philanthropic bequest disappears. Preston leaked one piece of information. The decoding is incomplete. The consultant is unqualified. By 9:30, the rival firm filed an emergency motion. They asked the judge to move the deadline forward. They argued the consulting process was irregular. They used the word unqualified 4 times. Catherine fought it. Hard. She called the judge's clerk. She filed a counter-motion. She cited precedent and professional standards and everything she had in her arsenal. The judge compromised. 3 o'clock. Non-negotiable. Not 5. 3. Darlene had 9 hours. She'd been stuck for 3 of them already. The pressure in that conference room was physical. You could feel it in the air like humidity before a storm. People spoke in short sentences. Doors closed a little harder. Coffee got poured but never finished. Raymond Tate pulled a chair up next to Darlene. He didn't say anything clever. He didn't try to take over. He just sat beside her. First time he'd ever treated her like a colleague instead of a curiosity.
"What are you seeing?" he asked.
I don't know yet, that's the problem. They worked together, tried 3 different interpretations, tested each one against